All right. So, been having technical difficulties for a while, and all of the things or doing none of the things, but we're here. So I'm super duper excited um, to chat with you guys for a little bit. And our topic is I quit. Um, and so I would love for you to share, to like, definitely to follow and support. And so we're going to get right into it. What does it look like when we quit? Right? So, as musical creatives in the church, right, we are either hired for the churches that we play for, or we are employed by the churches, or we are members of the churches that we play for, right? So, it's either one or the other. Most musical creatives are hired by their churches. More often than not, we are not members of the church. We are hired by the church. And so, what does this look like when we run into difficulties or we experience frustrations? Um, with the churches that we are hired for, or even just in some cases, we start to notice discrepancies that keeps us from playing or doing our best or serving our best, right? So let's start with this. What is the difference between a hired musician and a member? Right. And I know for us as musical creatives, we kind of have an idea um, of the difference. However, most people don't. So right before I dive in, because I definitely forgot to do this, I'm Hannah Love of Lover Music. I'm a vocal coach. I'm a worship coach. I not only develop individual voices, but I work with and I develop worship teams, right? Making sure that worship teams are singing in key, making sure that they are carrying the sound of the house, right? Which is just a really churchy way of saying each church has their own fingerprint, and the worship team is the first person that kind of sounds the alarm or lets you know what the fingerprint of this church is. You may never tune into a sermon, but you will pay attention to the music, right? And The Sound of Music is a podcast that allows me to have very candid conversations with our musical creatives, conversations that we're having in our small groups, in our group chats, that we're having on our text threads, or we are inboxing and venting and calling our friends. These are conversations that we're having. Um, and I feel it's super duper helpful to take these conversations out of these small, intimate, typically closed off spaces and bringing them to you, the audience, so that you understand what it is that we go through. You have a greater amount of grace for us, an increased amount of patience for us, right? And so today's episode is called I Quit Now. I am not quitting. Right? I love what I do. I love every bit of what I do. But as musical creatives, sometimes we have to serve our churches a 2 weeks notice or a 1 month notice, right? So we're going to walk through what that looks like, how we do it in a healthy perspective, what we do when our time is drawing to a close, and we might be struggling with how to leave in a healthy and holistic way. So, for starters, the difference between a hireling, which is a word that it is a biblical term, right, and a member of a church, someone that is hired is being compensated for a skill. I'm going to say that again. A hired individual, a hired musical creative, is being compensated for a skill. Now, there are a lot of feelings and mixed emotions regarding whether we should be compensated for our skill or not. First and foremost, run me my check, right? Give me my coins. And here is why. Majority of us have invested decades into our craft. We have invested schooling, whether we went to professional schools or whether we went to one-on-one coaches and instructors to learn how to play our craft. We, in the foundational years, spent hours doing nothing but hyper fixating on our craft. So it looks like spending hours with my YouTube playlist and me in the shower, just making sure I'm hitting the notes correctly, I'm saying the words correctly. It might look like, if you're a vocalist, investing in a vocal coach. It might look like, if you're a pianist, getting professional piano lessons, and then coming home and practicing for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on end, um, with practicing for hours and hours and hours and to make sure that we actually sound like something that makes sense, right? So for first and foremost, we have invested years into our education and then turned around and invested countless hours into curating this craft. We have um, also played in spaces for free, right? We have chosen to develop this craft and hone this craft and play for free at our local churches. Oh, my friend is having a concert. Let me hop on the piano real quick, or let me shed with you. Let me bang the drum, or let me hit the drum. Sorry, let me play my chosen instrument. We have spent hours curating this skill. We deserve to be compensated for it, and adequately at our skill level. So you're not going to find someone who's been playing the piano for a year charging the same rate as someone who's been playing the piano for 10 years, right? So, first and foremost, a musical creative should be compensated for their skill, right? A hired musical creative is not obligated to sharing and promoting church events. They might not necessarily align with the mission or vision of your church. They are literally there to collect a check, right? There is a contract or some kind of verbal or written documentation that is put into place that protects both parties, the church and the musical creative. And communications are limited to expectations set, updates, and adjusted rates of compensation should that apply. Over time, right, this relationship is both naturally and organically built. However, the requirements or expectation of a hired musical creative is not that they do a profession of faith, nor are they required to transfer their membership from one church to another. Okay? Now that we, in other words, you hired me to be your praise and worship leader, and that is all I'm going to do. I'm not your choir director, I'm your worship leader. I'm not going to hop on the keys and fill in when the pianist is out. I'm the worship leader. Okay. I'm not going to come to church on my non scheduled service day. I'm hired first and third Sundays or second and fourth Sabbath, and that's the only time I'm showing up. If you want me to do a morning and an afternoon service, you'll have to adjust my rate to meet said additional hours included. Now, what is the difference between the hired musical creative and the member? Now, the member is a part of, or they are aligning with or choosing to submit to the spiritual leaders of the church that they're playing for, right? They don't just play an instrument or sing on their scheduled days. They are discipled by the church. They are within the community of said church. They may support non-musical initiatives. So say the women's ministry is doing something or the prayer ministry is doing something. If they are a member of the church, 9 chances out of 10, you will see them at other church events where their skill set is not necessarily required. And lastly, they may be present for non church activities. Like there is a back to school drive, there is a Christmas event, there is a New Year's event that involves and meets the needs of the communities that they are serving in. A member would be present for those events. The hired musical creative will not. Why is this so important? First and foremost, churches have to understand that your musical creatives are not obligated to be in spaces that they are not paid for if they are not members of the church. And I'll say it again, your musical creatives are not obligated to be present for non musical initiatives and non service activities that are put on or executed by the church if they're not being paid for it, if they are not a member, because that's just not in their job description. For example, most of you work some kind of a job, right? Right? Say you work in corporate America, your scheduled shift is 9 to 5. There is a holiday party. Are you obligated to go to the holiday party, or would it be dope to go to the holiday party? You're not being paid. You're not going to get extra points with the boss, right? You're not going to get a bonus. Your bonus or your promotion is not solely dependent on all of the non-work activities that you attend. If you choose to do happy hour with your coworkers or go to the holiday party, that's a decision that you chose to make. How would you feel if your boss made the holiday party a requirement but then didn't pay you for it? Your response would be, "But I'm hired between the hours of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5." You don't have obligations, or you don't get to dictate what I do in my non-working hours. We can't dictate what musical creatives do in their non-working hours. It might make the church look good, but the musical creatives are not obligated to show up during their non-working hours. Now, why is this so important? This needs to be separated because it sets realistic expectations. The sooner this is understood, the easier it is for musical creators in the church to sever ties when they feel led to, right? Then it becomes easy to say, "I quit," because clear expectations have been set. I'm not working in children's church. I'm the hired worship leader. No, I'm not going to be the deaconess on the Sabbath where um, Sister Doris is out because she went back home to visit her family. No, I'm not a deaconess. I'm the hired musical creator. I'm going to set healthy and clear expectations so that everyone is on the same page. So, what does the interview process look like? How do we set things in motion so that these clear expectations are in fact being met? Well, number one, in the interview, you make it very clear, hey, what's expected of me? What is not expected of me? What should I do? What should I not do? What is the DNA of this church? What is the sound of this house, etc.? Right? The contract is drawn. Everyone agrees to a number and a schedule, including rehearsal times, etc. The interview is successful. You have now been serving at this church for 2 years, right? You're meeting the terms of your agreement. This is very important. However, life starts to life in whichever way life begins to life. And now you're realizing it's time for me to go. First and foremost, you need to figure out why you're leaving. Are you leaving because you're angry? Are you leaving because you're hurt? Are you leaving because you were overlooked? Is there a difference in theology? You believe in one thing and you're noticing that the pastor believes in something different. Are you not being compensated? Are you moving away from the geographical location of the church? Are you starting school and your school schedule now drastically affects your ability to meet your honored requirements? Was there a change in service time, right? There are multiple factors that causes someone to choose to no longer wish to lead or be present or be hired by your church. And all of them are not bad. And I think that's where some disconnects come from, where churches might feel a little bit of pressure, or they might feel a little discouraged when people start to leave. And now the assumption is something went wrong. And 9 chances out of 10, things really didn't go wrong. Right? It's an assumption, but it's not a fair one. Nothing went wrong per se. Life just started lifing, and I realized this might not be the best fit for me due to insert reason here. Now, you're ready to quit. You are ready to tender your resignation. You're ready to bow out and back out gracefully. What are some steps that you can follow that will make sure that when you leave, it is done in grace, it is done with love, and it doesn't damage people in the process? First and foremost, go holla at God. Like, go in your prayer closet and go and pray. Okay? Make sure that you're hearing from God. Have the Father check your spirit and check your emotions and check your thought process. Again, are you quitting because you're angry? Are you quitting because you're mad? Because no one is listening to you? Are you throwing a temper tantrum? Are you a full-blown adult throwing a temper tantrum, and to get their attention, well, I quit and I'm never coming back? When you go to the Father, he will reveal, hey, this is me, or no, that's not me, and you need to grow up. And I'm actually telling you to stay here because an area of you is underdeveloped and will only become developed in this space. There are some parts of my character that only got developed when I stayed in places because God told me not to move. There were certain things in me that needed to be worked out. And God is so sovereign and so gracious that he will work certain things in our character out in smaller spaces, right? He's not going to work out parts of my character when my audience or my reach is 5,000. He's going to work certain things out in my character when my audience and my reach is 5 people. Because it is much easier to apologize and rebuild and restore a relationship with the 5 than it is to restore and reposition myself or do a character. There's a word I'm looking for. Oh, it slipped my mind. But to do like an adjustment, like a character adjustment. That's not the word, but that's the best word that I can think of in front of 5,000 people. I messed up. These 5 people can forgive me. We can work it out. But 5,000 people? Now I have to do damage control. That's the word. Before 5,000 people. Now I have to heal and restore before 5,000 people. Something in my character was underdeveloped. And when it should have been dealt with, it wasn't. So I'm going to go to my prayer closet and I'm going to have the Father check me. Am I retaliating, or did I collect enough data to justify why it's time for me to go? Which then moves on to point number 2. What's the data saying? What is the reason? Why are you leaving? Are you noticing that you started working and the person who hired you, whether it was the pastor, whether it was the worship pastor, the senior pastor, the music director, whoever it was that hired you, they presented the church in one light? You get there, and after a few Sundays, you're like, 1 + 1 is giving 5. And this space is actually going to tarnish my character. Let me not stay here. Is this an emotionally led decision, or have I been following the breadcrumbs? So we might have a difference in theology, and this is a very touchy subject, are you paying me on time? We signed a contract that said I should be paid. My contract says a church is required to pay me no more than 2 hours after the completed service. You get 1 grace period. The second week, there is a grace period. So am I going weeks without getting paid? That might be a valid reason to leave. Did the pastor present or the leader present the church appropriately. The church is a grassroots church and they're just starting out, but the church was presented as a mega church, or the church was presented as a young church that appeals to young people, but it's a bunch of older members who have a heart for young people, but are resistant to change. So they don't want to hear CCM every week. They just want the same tried and true songs that they got saved to 50, 60 years ago. Right? Who is the decision maker or the trigger puller in the church? Are they the ones that are making the decisions? And now it is drastically affecting your ability to properly lead. The background vocalist, and this is where me as the worship coach comes in. They presented the background vocalist as, I have all my stuff together. But when you actually listen to them, 2 of them are tone deaf, 4 of them don't show up to rehearsal, and the strongest singer that's there has an attitude problem. Musicians don't honor and respect their leaders, and not just the worship leader, but they don't honor and respect the pastor. They're disrespectful behind the closed doors. So yes, on the pulpit, you sound amazing, but behind closed doors, your character makes me go. So what's the data saying? Now that you've gotten the data, you've gone to the Father, you've prayed, you've gotten the data. Now you schedule a meeting. You find a time when you and the person who hired you, along with the senior pastor, depending on the culture of the church, are available, and you schedule a meeting. Up to this point, you're not ceasing your prayer. You've already made your decision. I am leaving. The Father has released you to leave. However, we still do things in decency and in order. So you're praying up into this meeting. This is what your prayer should look like. All right, God, you told me to leave. When should I tell them? The sooner the better. How should I tell them? What words should I use? What words shouldn't I use? What is the best way to communicate my heart so that they hear it and the relationship is not completely severed? So you schedule a meeting. In this meeting, you are using gentle, direct, but firm language. You are expressing yourself in such a way where if they want you to come back, it's a no-brainer. Now, you know you're not going back, but should they want you to come back, it's a no-brainer. I remember I was leaving a church. This was a while back, and I struggled with how to tell the pastor that I was leaving. And I remember including a few people in my village, and I'm like, can you guys pray for me? I know I need to say insert topic here, but I just didn't know how to say it. And I remember the Father going, pull a Nathan. Now, Nathan is my father's name. So I kind of chuckled when God said that. But he meant Nathan the prophet. So if we know anything about Nathan and David, Nathan shows up once. Nathan says what he got to say. Nathan bounces. However, Nathan delivers it in such a way where David got it and Nathan never called his name. Hey, there's a man. If you don't know the story of Nathan, hey, there's a man. He has a bunch of sheep. You know, his company is coming into town. He needs to serve his company food to eat, but he doesn't want to kill one of his beloved sheep. So he goes next door to the neighbor who has one little sheep, one little lonely sheep, just one lamb. The lamb eats with the children at the table, and the man, rich man with all his sheep, goes and kills the man's one sheep and serves it for dinner. What would you do? And David goes, you must kill the man. It was wrong. Bah, 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 bah. And all Nathan said was, and you are that man. And David knew exactly what he was saying. So I pulled a similar I pulled a Nathan. I pulled from a real life experience that I had. I said, let me ask you a question. This is a situation. How would you handle it? And he answered exactly the way I knew he would. I play chess. So I kind of set that up beautifully. And I said, do you feel like your church is like the church I just described? And the pastor stopped talking and he goes, unfortunately, we are. And I was like, and that's why I have to leave. And we continued talking. The conversation was almost 2 hours. We left, both of us in tears, because I'm a crybaby. Both of us in tears. However, I was very clear. I have to go. The longer I stay is the more I am in active disobedience with what God is telling me to do. I finished out my term as I agreed to. Severed ties, it's all love. There's no love lost. They could call me tomorrow to go and lead worship. And if God says yes, I would go. Just long term. And where I was in that season of my life, I couldn't. So be direct. Use very clear language. Be respectful, but be loving. The Bible says we must season our words with salt. Or season our words with grace. I'm sorry. In other words, you're delivering what you have to say in such a way that if you were to hear it back, it wouldn't hurt. Right? So we've prayed, we've collected data, we've scheduled a meeting, we're using direct language. You give a clear end date and you offer to hire and train your replacement if you are led to. Now, this might work if you are leaving the church because you're moving away. Geographically, it's just you're in Virginia and you're moving to New York. You would need to find a replacement, right? It's not like the church was just out here just doing nonsense, right? Or you're going back to school and your time is going to be drastically spent with enrolling in classes and doing work. Let me help to hire a replacement. Hiring a replacement works when you are comfortable with how the church conducts business and your theology and their theology matches. So here's the thing, us musical creatives, you kind of run in packs. So those that believe in keeping Sabbath know other Sabbath keeping worship leaders. Those that believe in the rapture tend to hang out with other believers that believe in the rapture. So your thinking or your theology is similar and it's in alignment with each other, right? The only time you probably would not train your replacement is if the church is operating with unethical morals or if their theology is completely off. For example, you are in church and you're noticing that they're presenting as a Christian church, which thank God this has never happened to me, but this has happened to a few of my friends. The church presented as Christian. They walked in and the church was doing witchcraft and they had no idea. There were certain chants that were being had. There were certain body motions that were being done. There were certain things that the person speaking would move their hand in a very specific way. And something in the person, discernment, caused them to go, wait, are you guys saved? Oh, yeah, we believe in Jesus and candles. Or we believe in Jesus and sage. Or we believe in Jesus and insert occult practice here. Depending on your convictions, you might not be comfortable with referring another worship leader to this church. Does that make sense? Right? So, depending on the reason behind why you are leaving the church, that will determine if you feel comfortable enough to hire a replacement or to aid in hiring a replacement. The last thing that you do, you follow up with a letter and you maintain honor and integrity in serving until your last day. Now, this is something that is extremely important and very overused in the church. We love going live. We love going live and we love rambling, Come in the room, come in the room, come in the room. Let me tell you something. I got tea. I got tea. Come in the room. Yes, Pookie, I see you. Girl, you're not gonna believe what happened to me. Yes, yes, honey. I'm going live about the service that I just came out of, and you don't do that. Don't. It looks really bad when you are severing ties with the church for insert reason here, and then you go live and begin to defame, discredit, and dishonor the church that probably at one point was paying your rent or was compensating you enough to cover your household bills. You don't get to go live and dishonor churches. Regardless of how you feel, hold your peace and sever ties. And here is why. You putting down another church doesn't have the effect that you think it has. You are seen as less than credible. You are seen as untrustworthy. You're seen as a loose cannon. You're seen as not a keeper of secrets. And most of the people that are doing this are claiming themselves to be prophets. So how am I trusting God's voice in your ear if you don't even have self-control with hitting a live button? Yes, it hurts and it feels uncomfortable. Suck it up. Respectfully. Hush your mouth. Like, hush. Hush. If you're severing ties, just sever ties. Don't go live. Don't rant. Don't ramble. You tell your chosen 3 or you tell your preferred 4 and you leave it at that. You honor places when you leave so that you are not looked on as unreliable and untrustworthy. Here's a flip side to that. There are a bunch of groups on Facebook that New York City musicians or church musicians or whatever. And oftentimes you'll see a pastor post, hey, I'm looking for a worship leader for my church, or hey, I'm looking for an organist for my church. Oftentimes before we leave, we like to secure the next gig before we're on our way out from the first one. And we go in these groups and we post incessantly with no tact. I'm available for all times, blah, 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 blah. And while it's under the guise of I'm putting myself out there, you're pooping in the pot that you also want to eat from, right? You are letting the community know that you're looking, but some of the community members that are in the chats that you're posting with attend the church that you currently play for or are in relationship with the pastor that you're slandering on social media. So now a lot of times pastors find out, and I know this because a lot of my friends are pastors. Pastors find out that their musicians and worship leaders are quitting and they never had a conversation. They're mindlessly scrolling on social media and they see a live or they see a post looking for a new church to play at. Here's my availability. And the time that is posted coincides with the church's already confirmed schedule time. And now the pastor's like, wait, I have to look for a musician. When were you going to tell me? Regardless of what unethical practices you feel the church that you are leaving is conducting, you still operate with integrity. So, you're ready to quit, you pray. You look at the data. What's the reason? Is this an emotionally led decision? What's happening? You schedule a meeting and you're direct. You give a clear end date, and if this applies, you offer to assist in hiring and training your replacement. You follow up with a letter so that there's a paper trail. You maintain honor and integrity in serving. You don't dishonor the church or slander the church that you're coming from. Churches, pastors, when your musical creators are tendering their resignation, accept it. And here is why. You don't know what God is doing in their life that is causing them to leave at the time that they are leaving. last year, I was serving at a church and the father led me to leave. And I didn't know why. And it hurt. It was painful. Some of you guys know what was happening like behind the scenes. Last year was a doozy. Right. And the father told me to leave. And I'm grateful that when I was tendering my resignation, the pastor received it. It was painful, but it was received. Unbeknownst to me, the month after I left, the father had me go through deliverance. Now, my deliverance doesn't look like writhing on the floor, right? My deliverance looks like a lot of crying and inner healing. Had I continued to lead worship while actively going through deliverance, I would have been bleeding all over people. And I would not have been hearing God clearly. I would have been hearing God through my filters, my pain, my struggles, my fears, my anxieties, my worship, all of that. Instead of the congregation receiving God's my pure worship, they would have received something tainted that was inedible. Oftentimes we're leaving for a plethora of reasons. We're not obligated to tell you why we're leaving. We are obligated to tell you that we are leaving, and you are not obligated to hold us hostage. It's control and manipulation in a form of witchcraft. I am leaving, and I've seen this. Person A is leaving. I'm going to land the plane soon. Person A is leaving, and they go to the pastor. The pastor says, I reject it. I will not accept it. You are staying, insert churchy reason here. A week or two later, they invite their friend who's a prophet, Profit. Because in this case, ain't no way you hearing from God and you acting like this. We'll call a spade a spade. And you go to the person who you give these general prophetic words. The Lord is going to do it. You're coming out. You go to this person and all of a sudden you have a specific word for them. And guess what the specific word is? The Lord is leading. The Lord wants you to know that you need to be rooted and planted here. And because the prophetic is so sensitive, nobody ever wants to tell the prophet that they're wrong. The prophetic is so sensitive. If you're hearing God and God said that, you must be right. So now I'm staying in a place that God told me to leave 6 months ago because the leader of the house doesn't feel that me saying that it's time for me to transition is accurate, because now you can't benefit from my brokenness. You can't benefit from my unhealed spaces. You can't benefit from my areas of development. You can't benefit from my pain. You can't benefit from my anger. I lead worship best when I'm most broken. And the minute I leave and I get healed and healthy, you can no longer manipulate my emotions. You can't manipulate my finances. You can't promise raises or even promise to pay me in hopes that I'm saying you can no longer manipulate me into staying here. But I can't have that. So I have to convince you to stay when you don't need to. And when we do this to our musical creatives, we create pain when God is trying to heal. So yes, I'm going to come for my musical creatives and I'm going to tell them, you do things in decency and in order, even if the church is not. But pastors, for all things good and holy, when we tender our resignations, honor it, receive it, and pray for us. There is no monopoly in the kingdom of heaven. No pastor owns people. Churches don't own people. We don't do bragging rights with how many souls we've won for the kingdom and how many people we've invited to discipleship. Ministry is not a competition. This is not the NBA. This is not the NFL. Why are we competing? Why? Allow people to leave when they are led to leave. Don't hold us hostage. It's not the end of the world. If God is telling us to leave, he's not obligated to tell you first. I'm his child as much as you're his child. I can hear as much as you can hear. So yeah, I quit. This place isn't where God needs me to be right now. He's calling me to a season of healing and I can't do it while I'm leading. Or Your church operates with unethical behaviors, and I can no longer accept your resources because now I have to answer to God for why I chose to stay in a place that dishonors Him. My convictions and my walk and my relationship with God is greater than this little $350 a week check that I'm getting. And just in case we don't believe that this is biblical, Paul and Barnabas were having a disagreement with Mark. They were going to do a ministry trip, and John Mark, that's his name, promises to go. And then at the last minute, he drops out, leaving Paul and Barnabas to go alone. They're going on another trip. Barnabas says, hey, we should bring Mark. And Paul is like, nah, he's not coming. He's untrustworthy. He said he was going to come. He ain't come. And it caused such a rift that Paul said, you know what? I'm going to take my people and I'm going to go here. Barnabas, you take your people and Mark and go over there. I love you. All is great in the kingdom of heaven. We going to win souls for Jesus. We going to raise the dead. We going to heal the sick. We going to cast out demons. We going to spread this gospel. We just not going to do it together because we don't agree. Now, fast forward later on in the book of Acts, Paul extends an invitation for Mark to come back and, they reconcile and all the things. But there was a season where Paul had enough wisdom to go, pew, you go left, I'm going to go right, and it's okay. Paul still wrote to all the churches, and Barnabas still did the thing, and eventually everybody heals and everyone reconciles. So if Paul and Barnabas had the wisdom to cut ties and go their separate ways, you too can cut ties and go your separate ways and say those beautiful words. I quit. God gets the glory. The enemy is defeated. I have the victory. I still love you. I'll still share your content if it ain't crazy. I'll still support you. But I quit. No, you can't manipulate me. No, you can't convince me to stay. No, you can't make me feel guilty for hearing God and moving accordingly. Those days are done. Those manipulative, controlling ways, they're done. So, say it with me. I quit. That being said, I took a whole lot more of your time than I planned to. The conference is next week. Next week, Sunday, Judah's Tribe gathers. It starts on Sunday. I am your host. I am kicking it off. We are going to talk all things worship. We are going to talk about who we worship, why we worship, the importance of worship, how we worship, making sure that we're good, making sure that we're not bleeding all over people, making sure that we're able to take a step back if we need to. But most importantly, that our corner, our private life with the Father is in alignment with what we're presenting on the pulpit. So Gathering Judah's Tribe is your virtual conference. It is where the music directors, the music ministers, worship pastors, worship leaders, and everyone in between will go and be encouraged. They will go and be poured into. They will go and get training, right? Each night we meet at 9 p.m. To register, you are going to go to, I'm going to put it in the comments. Did I do it right? Love More Music. Let's see. To register, you are going to visit www.lovemoremusicllc.com/Judah, all lowercase. I am so excited to be with you. Just know that these sessions will only go live in a private group. So in order to get access to the private group, you must register. You must register. I cannot wait to see you there. Our instructors have been preparing for months. Right? They have been going to the Father and going before the throne and asking, what is it that you need to hear? Where do you need to be equipped? Where do you need to be developed? How can they present material that seeks to edify your team? We are so excited to partner with you. We are so excited to have you in the room. We are so excited to worship with you. We cannot wait to see you there. So, again, that link is in the chat. Make sure you like, you share, and you follow. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, it is okay to say, I quit. Have a wonderful evening. See you next week.